Good afternoon and welcome to this talk on Agile Project Management in Local Government as part of the Digital Leaders Innovation Week. We're actually going to cover a wider topic than just Agile Project Management in this, and I will warn you that some of the slides are quite text heavy within this, but ultimately that's so you have something that you can take away and be usable. In most of my presentations I generally try and just use images and talk over the top, but I realise that when you then take that presentation away and you're trying to do some work with it, it's quite difficult to use those slides without necessarily always referring back to a video. So for this instance, slides are quite heavy. I won't be reading them though, you'll be pleased to know, so it's not a death by PowerPoint presentation, but it is something that hopefully is usable for you, that you can use and take forwards into the work that you do. So as usual, introduction to me. I'm Richard Godfrey. I'm the Managing Director of Sin City. Founded it about 3.5 years ago now, and have been working in local government for the last decade or so, even more. And a lot of what I do is around going in and looking at digital programs of work, digital transformation programs, change programs, anything really that involves IT, digital in the business. So looking at how we're actually trying to deliver outcomes from kind of the implementations or the investment we're making in technology. So as well as obviously being the MD of Sin City, which is a one-man company, so I do laugh a little bit that I'm the MD of a team of one. I'm also the founder of Ditch Agile Project Management, which is our software, which we'll touch on very, very briefly towards the end of this. I'm the author of the book Be the Five, and that's a methodology that non-technical directors, chief execs can use to understand how digital is being used across the organisation. And you'll see today that elements of that will be used across the various frameworks we're going to talk about. And I've also got a podcast called Digital Confidence and Decision Making, which again, the first series really is mostly my book. We talk about the book, we go into details, we read chapters, but we go into more detail on each of the elements of it, how they worked, why we did things certain ways. So it just gives you a bit more in-depth view on that. And then series 2 has largely been my thoughts, ideas around digital transformation through change and everything else. And some of them are there just to challenge people, and some are really a bit more collaborative about how we should be working and doing things. And obviously my contact details, if you need them, are on the screen. So I mentioned we're going to go a little bit wider than just project management in this. And one of the things that's become clear as I've worked on programs across local government and indeed wider into the third sector and various other places is kind of a misunderstanding on Agile and how Agile works and how it should work and how it's operated. And in local government, you've effectively got something that's very highly governed. There is a huge amount of control placed over the top of projects, and it's very, very different to actually become agile. So what we are going to talk about is ways of basically becoming agile without jumping into talking about how we're going to use Scrum methodologies or how we're going to build products or anything. This is about how you guys can effectively become leaner, quicker, more efficient at how you do your digital programs. So let's just bring it back to some of the problems that I see constantly. If you read the MJ magazine or LGC or any of those local government articles, you'll see lots and lots of stories about councils not being able to balance their budgets and maintain services with the cuts and austerity, things that have happened in the past. And we always saw digital as the key kind of driver of how to escape that or get away from it. And there was lots of time and money invested in digital programs, huge amounts of work. And what I see coming out the back of that isn't really actually improving things. All the councils that, not all the councils, a lot of the councils that have invested heavy in tech and have been on stage giving talks, showcasing what they're doing, most of those actually have still been in the same measures that everyone else is in, where they're still struggling with budgets and still struggling to deliver services in the way that they were before. So actually we're not moving the conversation very far forwards. And what we're doing is actually investing in technology, but we seem to be doing kind of like the wrong thing a bit better than we were before. And we're not necessarily doing the right thing, delivering the right outcomes, and actually making sure that we have kind of a method or a model that we can work to that would enable us to invest well in technology, deliver proper outcomes, deliver the savings we need, deliver the efficiencies. And hopefully what we can do is give you a kind of this framework that we're going to talk about that you can sit behind and basically work your plan out, work your strategy, work your projects and your program out to understand how you're actually going to deliver these things. And again, it says in there that we're tinkering around the edges. We know a lot of the time we're not actually touching the legacy technology, we're building new things around that. We know that with governance levels, we can spend ages writing reports, whether that's the business case initially or the weekly highlight, monthly highlight reports that you're doing at the end of projects. It can all become overburdensome. So we're really looking at how we can bring a level of agility to all of that. And my last point there is obviously local government is obsessed with publishing a strategy, and they love publishing a digital strategy and shouting about it. And I'm going to again kind of explain why you shouldn't be doing that, or why you should move away from that if possible, and which bits you can publish and which bits you shouldn't. And so we're going to look at how we can fix all of that by incorporating agility into your work and into the organisation in which you work. And again, we'll get into it in more detail, but every time we end up talking about agility or agile, it comes back to almost being a conversation about Scrum and how Scrum works. And Scrum is all about building products. In this, we're going to be talking about projects and programs, and the two are different, and it's an important differentiation is close enough between the two, that we're not necessarily talking about how you're going to build the products underneath the project, but we are talking about how we're going to run the project itself. So to steal a couple of dictionary definitions, someone who's agile can move quickly and easily. An agile system is one that's designed in a way that makes it easy to make changes. And that's almost the opposite of local government. In a lot of ways, we're not able to move quickly and easily, even to get a change control signed off. Sometimes that has to go through multiple tiers and multiple people to get you to a point where you can sign it off. And we're not building systems in a way that we can quickly make changes. We write a business case, we then write a plan, we write a project plan, and we're stuck and we're fixed to that. And we can't make changes within it. And where again I think people have got confused is we use the term agile to cover a broad range of topics now, when if you go back to the start, agile really referred to the manifesto for agile software development. And I've put a link just to the website at the bottom there if you want to go and have a look at that, how it was designed and who designed it. But essentially you had a team of very, very good software engineers and guys who had their own kind of methodologies, including the guy who invented Scrum is in there. But they all came together and said, not this is how you build products, but actually here's some values and some principles that you can apply to when you are building software. And how you build it is still kind of up to you. So what we need to do is we really need to take those values and principles and apply those to how we're then running our digital programs. And again, we can put them straight into projects or anything else. So what you'll see throughout this, I've actually highlighted the 4 values and principles in orange deliberately, because you will see those values and principles on different slides, and they'll always be in orange throughout the slide. So you can see how what we're doing is saying, yes, we're going to still deliver projects, we're going to still do business cases, we're still writing strategies, but you can see where we've tried to kind of apply these principles and how we're going to use what we believe it means to be agile in those projects and programs. So as I say, we're not here to talk about Scrum, DSDM, PMBOK, Prince2, or any of those things, but all of them fundamentally make up what we're going to be delivering and how we're going to do it. But primarily we're looking at the values and principles and saying, how are we applying these to the work that we're doing? And obviously this presentation is our interpretation of how we're doing that. So my favourite of all the principles is effectively simplicity. The art of maximising the amount of work not done is essential. And so what we're trying to say from that is we do a lot of work in local government, and we do a lot of paperwork, and we do a lot of governance, and we do a lot of risk assessments and equality impacts assessments and every other assessment you can think of to make sure that we've ticked every single box before we do projects or before we deliver anything. And in a lot of ways we spend more time doing that than we actually do delivering the project or delivering any outcomes that we want to see achieved at the end of it. And we know that there's always going to be audits and audit processes, but again, we believe that if we get things right from the outset and we get things right from the start, that actually you can take care of some of that naturally through how you're designing your program of work and how you're designing your projects. So at no point are we saying we're not doing anything, we're not doing governance, we're not doing audits, we're just saying we can make it simpler, easier and quicker for you to do that, always coming back to the value and principle of simplicity. And so that's really why we start with the strategy, because we believe that if you get the strategy right and you write it in the right way, then everything else just naturally flows from it. And you can kind of tell stories throughout your work, and you can always refer back to the strategy, why you're doing something and what the outcomes were. And again, once we get to the end of this presentation, you'll kind of see how that all comes back together to give you that plan and the simplicity of it all. So DITCH itself is an acronym. It stands for Digital and Transformational Change. The and is important because it's not digital transformation, it's digital and transformational. So it covers all of your change programs, not just your digital stuff. But really we're looking at a framework that we can apply in local government to say, how do we make sure that we are delivering our digital program in a way that is effective, it's efficient, it's delivering results, it's delivering more, it's delivering quicker. And we believe that there's 5 stages to that. And again, once we put them all together, you'll see how that works and how they all flow naturally from one to the next. And you'll start to understand why doing things in a more traditional way actually is hampering your ability to be agile. So again, we're not talking about building products here. We're talking about strategies, plans, business cases, more importantly, projects, and then the benefits that come out the back of that. If underneath this, you want to sit down and go, okay, we're still going to build our products using a Scrum methodology or using a DSDM methodology, absolutely fine, do that. This isn't interfering with that. This is a kind of like a tier above that of how you get to that point in the first place. So again, stealing from the dictionary, strategy, general plans or a set of plans to achieve something, and the art of planning, the best way to gain an advantage, especially in a war. And the reason I use that is because quite often what we see are 2 things. One is a strategy that's I refer to as buzzword bingo, and the second is that we see a strategy that is a 5-year plan that's been printed into a PDF and put on a website. And so you can't sit there and say we're going to write a strategy for a war and just put lots of buzzwords into it and put in cloud, data principles, omnichannel, things like that. They're just words, they're meaningless apart from kind of explaining what each of those things are. And you can say, we are going to go omnichannel, that's fine, but unless you've identified kind of like the problems and what you're trying to solve by doing that, it's just a buzzword in a document. Likewise, if you're writing a 5-year strategy, and bear in mind I've also done this, I'm a hypocrite and guilty of this myself. If you're writing a 5-year strategy and saying that's our strategy, we'll PDF it, we'll put it away, we'll work to it, and in 5 years we'll come back and review it and write a new one, you're again missing the point. So within this and within being agile within what we're doing, we're actually going to write an element of a strategy that's fixed, but there's going to be a live section that sits underneath it. So when we are talking to teams and departments about their problems, their challenges, their ambitions, what they need to achieve, that section is live, so that you can keep coming back to it, keep referring to it, keep updating it, keep changing it, in the same way that when you're at war, and I'm not saying digital is a war, but sometimes it feels like a battle. But if you're at war, you don't just go, this is our strategy and we're sticking to it completely. If something changes on the battlefield, the enemy do something different, you have to be able to adapt and change to that. So again, you'll notice something in orange at the bottom, responding to change over following a plan. So even when you've got the plan, you have to be able to tweak it and change it. And we believe if you follow this model, you'll be able to do that. Having said that, writing a strategy isn't easy, and actually there's a lot of work that goes into it. If you're just going to write a 50-page document one-off, that's fine, that's probably a couple of months work, one-off, off it goes, published onto the website, everyone's happy, we've signed it off. With an actual strategy, you should be looking at that constantly, going back to it, reviewing it, referring back to previous projects, what else you've done, and looking at how that can be kept constant, updated and refreshed. And so there is lots of work to do. There's lots of conversations to have with lots of departments, lots of teams. You need to make sure that that is happening almost ongoing, rather than just talking about a fixed period of time that your strategy is live for. So having said that, what should be in your strategy? And what we should have in it are three things really. So everyone will have a vision and mission statement, and some councils have published theirs, some councils have published theirs and called it a strategy, which it's not. But you need to have something, I believe, at the top that basically says not just what your council wants to achieve in total, but what you want to achieve through your investments in digital and through ICT. And that bit of the strategy can be published. You can put a nice example of that out, and I'll shout out Dorset Council here, because actually they have pages on their website with the vision and mission statement, and it's very clear that's what it is rather than a strategy, that you can look at and see what they want to achieve and their actual ambitions. So very easy to follow. You then from that have a set of guiding principles, and the best way you can describe these is the road barrier on a road. So it's not helping you actually get to where you're trying to get to, but it's stopping you falling off the road and down the cliff and breaking. So you can sit down and work out some principles that you're going to work to. And I've got a couple on the next slide, but I'll say one of the key things of this is that people always talk about a cloud strategy, and your cloud strategy isn't a strategy. Moving to cloud is a principle within your strategy. So you'll have a set of principles that as an organization, each time you're doing a project or doing a procurement, you can go back to and say, have we followed these? Does it make sense? Then what you have after that is a series of actions. So this is your live section. So you're going to have an ambition, and that could be completely council-wide. It could be the entire council has an ambition, and we know you're going to have corporate plans and ideas that the council wants to achieve. Or it could just be the department or a team within the department. So actually over the next 2 years, we need to save X amount of pounds from this service, or we need to make this more efficient, or we need to grow. It might be around the planning team. They need to grow their ambitions that they want to achieve. Once you understand the ambition, and again, that could be through lots of conversations, it could be through documentation that already exists or anything, you can sit there and go, okay, what is stopping the council or the department from achieving that ambition today? So looking at this from a digital perspective or a technology perspective, a change perspective, what are the problems that we can identify within the digital team, the ICT team, that is stopping the council from, or the department from getting to where they want to be? We make a list of those and we get all of that out, and that list could be huge, it could be massive, and it could include poor data quality, it could include that the system they're using is legacy, the system doesn't let them work from home, It doesn't integrate to other systems. There's a huge amount of things that can be problems. And if you want, I've got templates as well that I can give you that help you identify some of those. And it talks about kind of legacy technology, and we have manage, transform, and improve within that. So you can have systems that you just need to manage. You can have systems that you can improve, and systems that you reimagine. So a blank piece of paper, effectively, to start. But how you do that is through conversation, discussion, talking to other departments. From that, you can come away and go, okay, what actions can we then take? So what can we do in our team to bridge the gap from where this department is today to where they want to get to? And you might not be able to bridge the entire gap, but you might be able to accelerate them on the journey, and you might be able to help them get there quicker. So you might list out that you can do data projects. You might list out that you could change the software that they're using. You could list out that you could integrate into a particular other system that would take away a lot of the manual tasks. There will be things you can automate within that. There'll be processes and everything else. Again, you're going to create a list. And as part of this, what you're going to have is effectively multiple copies of this document, because you're going to have one per department. And depending on how big a council you are, you may need to break that down further and chunk them up by directorate or anything else. But you will be able to see from there that there's going to be key themes across that, and you can start to look at what key themes are we seeing that are constantly occurring throughout all of these actions that we believe we can deliver. And again, remember that some of these sections might be to actually help 3 people. It might just be a small finance team that are really struggling with one particular thing. It might be something that you can spread across the entire council, and all 3,000 people will actually be involved in it. So you can have everything in there, from the very big to the very small. Now, what we have in guiding principles is a really badly formatted slide, which I didn't know had automations in. So I'm just going to click through those quickly so you can see all of that. But I use something I call it ICES. Obviously, there's a couple of X's at the top. So the X's refer to the organisation. So when I did this project up in Durham, it was obviously a D for Durham that started it. And effectively, we're saying we put the good of the organisation over individual departments. And in theory, we're saying don't buy something that makes one department much better at what they do, but actually has a negative impact on other departments. And part of that is, again, to make sure that you're actually having those conversations and talking to people and saying, if we do this, what is the impact? Integrated is about being sensible and logical about how deeply integrated systems need to be, or people need to be, processes, teams need to be, to make sure we've had the right conversations to say, we want to do this project, you're doing that. Can we integrate the two? Can we bring them together? And if we can, does it need to be the entire record that comes, or does it just need to be one field that pops up? Does it need to be integrated, or can we just use an email that goes from one to the other and alert you? So just making sure, again, you're joining things up, having the right conversations with people. Cloud's in there. Again, my background, firm believer that cloud and software as a service is the right way to go. But also in local government, we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of systems that aren't there yet. So software as a service, first choice, but ultimately kind of have something that says, if we can't get that, we'll have hosted. If we can't get that, we'll obviously have it on premise. But that would be the third choice. But again, when we're talking to someone to sign off a business case to say we're buying a system that's on premise, we can actually refer back to the guiding principles and say, look, we looked for cloud first, we looked for hosted, but actually the best solution for us is this one. Ecosystem then is about thinking about some of the tools that you already use, and a good example would be anyone that uses something like Salesforce, because they've got the Salesforce App Exchange. So immediately you've got thousands of apps that are designed to work with Salesforce. So you don't have to build APIs, you don't have to necessarily connect them or spend money connecting them or anything like that. So where you're looking at some of your core systems, look wider than the core system. Another good example, if you work in kind of like the private sector or me, Xero as a finance system also has multiple tools like Fluidly and Dext and Fertly and various other ones that are designed to work with Xero. So look at not just the application you use, but the ecosystem around it. Microsoft has one, Google has one, Amazon ecosystem is massive. See what's out there and what's available that already works with the tools that you have. And then obviously security as the last one. I shouldn't really need to go into that in any more detail, but you have to make sure that you actually paying attention to that. You can't just go off and build stuff without kind of including IT and checking on the security of stuff. What you might want alongside this is kind of like a high level architecture of where you think you're going with stuff. If you're using CRMs, web forms, line of business systems, building some stuff on a platform, kind of have a high level swim lane diagram maybe that you can say, okay, when we're looking at procurement, when we're looking at new ideas, we've got the guiding principles, we've got our swim lane, we know exactly where each bit fits when we come to looking at the solutions that we're going to put in place. So it's just something that really gives you, like I said, that the barrier at the side of the road. So it's not telling you where you're going to get to or how you're going to get there. It's just going, follow this route, always use these as the barrier that we're working to. And it will again make things much simpler and easier for you. So what does this look like then pulled together? So if we imagine this was the commercial development department, we've done some work for those guys. We've looked at what their ambition is, and in some cases, you're not just going to have one line, you might have multiple ambitions of savings and efficiencies and various other bits. But under that, you can see a list of problems. So we've gone in, we've talked to them, we've found out what the problems is, what are their headaches, where they think they're not efficient, what's stopping them from achieving that ambition that they want to achieve. So we can actually just sit down and start to pull a list together of all those problems. And again, initially you might just want to do tabs on a spreadsheet, just start to pull this information together. Once you've got that, you're then going to have a list of actions. And again, I said some of these slides are wordy, I'm not going to read them out, but after this you can go back and see what some of those actions look like. But you might want to see the third one up at the bottom. We've got roll out Microsoft 365. That might be something that you see in multiple teams, and you take that as one big project that you might have to do across the whole organization. We've got something on there about explore online gift aid solutions. So again, that might be one very small team as part of a fundraising team or a development team that just need that one system. So what does that look like? And I think again, we need to break away a little bit from this concept that if we decide we need a booking system, we have to buy a corporate booking system. You don't. You buy a booking system for 3 people, 4 people, if they're the 3 or 4 that need it. And you might have another booking system in a different department that works in a different way, but is better for that team. So again, as you're going through these actions and thinking about what we can do and what systems we need, doing some discovery work, finding out what's out there, don't naturally assume that everything has to be a big corporate product. It's one of the biggest mistakes we make in local government, is saying, right, we've identified we need a booking system, so we're just going to go out and buy one and assume that one system can cover everyone in the council and everything they need. You just end up building stuff forever. So an example might be something like Calendly, which is very quick and easy to implement. You might just want your planning team to be able to have some webinars or some sessions with people who are thinking of putting planning apps in, just to go over how that works. You might need to buy 3 Calendly licenses, for example, for a very small amount of money. You can do that, set them up, and not worry about if every other team in the council is also going to use that. So again, think about how that works as you move through some of this. So you have your strategy, you've obviously got your ambition, you've got your problems, and then you've got a list of actions. What we're now going to do is extract some of those actions and make an annual plan around them. So some of this will be our projects, some might actually just be BAU work where we need to do some configuration changes or things, but for this purpose we're going to look at projects. And again, some councils do it, some councils don't, but we all work to a financial year. Every council works year by year financially, so let's actually plan our projects out based on the same time frame. So we can sit there and say, okay, over the next 12 months, here's all the projects that we think we can do based on the actions that we think we've pulled out of the strategy. And again, you might not have visited every single department up front. And this is again why it's live, because you might have visited half a dozen departments and started to pull together a plan from that. You can always add more in and do that, but you need to think about that plan. What resources have we got? How many projects can we deliver over a year? How long is each project? And as I mentioned, you might be Microsoft 365 to the entire council. That's a big project, might take the entire year. You might be rolling out something small, gift aid solution that we identified to the finance team. That might be a 3-week project, but you still have to resource everything and make sure you can fit all the projects you want to do in that year. And again, you might have some prerequisites that you need to do, but it's about getting bang for your buck and being lined up from day one at the start of the year to say, we believe this is everything we can deliver. And it's derived directly from the actions that we've pulled out of the strategy. So we're not just making projects up, we're not just thinking of projects on the spot, we're going back and saying, we think we need to do this project because we've identified this problem and we think this action solves it. And so it's a bit more information, but again, at the same point, you will have done some discovery, you will have done some work, you might not be 100% accurate. You might only be able to say, we think we need to do this project, we think it will take 16 weeks if 3 people are doing it. To set your plan out initially, that's all you really need. It's only at the business case stage that you're going to probably go into a bit more detail of what that actually looks like and how long that project's going to be and how long, kind of how much it's going to cost and various other bits that you can then set that in stone. But again, see at the bottom, continuous attention to good design enhances agility. So we come back to the plan and we say, right, now that project's fixed, we know what that looks like. Does that have a knock-on effect to any other project that we're doing? Do we have to move them around? Can we still resource this? Because all too often we start a project with a timeline and then we just start adding more projects because we want to try and deliver stuff. But we need the council, the directors, the chief execs to understand that we're a limited resource in most cases. Most IT teams, if you go into district councils, for example, are not really much more than 10, 12 people in a lot of cases. If that, it's not just an endless list of projects that we can deliver. So again, we're trying to just say, we're going to focus on these projects because these are the ones that we know will give us the biggest bang for our buck, having done the correct amount of work in the strategy to understand what that looks like. And really you will put yourself in a better position than kind of just working through the year ad hocly, adding stuff. And obviously if you've got projects that go into the next year, you can already start to populate the following year's project with the overlap of any projects that don't finish. So we're trying to really give you proper planning as part of the process that we're looking at from an IT perspective. And as I said, we're talking now about projects, but actually you can apply that to kind of BAU work that you need to do as well. And again, work out what that annual plan looks like, what the resourcing looks like. If something new comes in, you can chop and change. You can go back and say, actually, if you want to do this project, that's fine, but one of these other projects has to move. Again, we can't just work everyone to the bone and hope that we end up with good results at the end of it. What we should do though is when we get to the stage where we said a project is 20 weeks, is we should only do 20 weeks work and we should stop at that point. And at that point we come back and evaluate what the project looks like. And again, we'll get to that in the project section. So we've done our strategy, we understand the strategy, we understand what that is. We've then designed a plan, and obviously some of it is temporary. We know we've had to make good guesses, good assumptions based on how long projects are going to be. We're then going to get into the business case. And again, I've seen places argue that you don't need business cases for digital and stuff. You absolutely do, but they don't need to be monster documents. I've seen ones up to 50, 60 pages before that cover pretty much everything you've ever thought of in your life. What we're trying to do in this is actually say we can do projects and we can write business cases, but we can simplify them. So I've tweaked one of the values here from working software over comprehensive documentation to delivering projects over comprehensive documentation. And the reason we're saying that is because we've done some of that pre-work. So we're not having to write a business case necessarily that says we've got a buzzword bingo strategy. It says we're going to go omni-channel. So I'm trying to write a business case that justifies the investment in going omni-channel. That way you're going to get stuck. You're not going to be able to do that. You'll end up with a massive plan that has risks and issues all over the place. And in most cases, even again, if it's cloud or something like that, you'll actually end up in a position where the cost of it is more than what your current cost is. You're trying to have to justify a move to cloud or a move to omnichannel based on an increased cost when you don't necessarily have those problems that you're trying to solve as part of that. So what we're trying to do is get you to a point where you're telling a story. So we're effectively saying, we did the strategy work, we put the work in up front. We found that the commercial development department need to manage its relationships. You'll recognize that as being the ambition for that department. We can help them on this journey by undertaking 3 projects we've identified. And again, on that ambition list, we had a big list of actions we could take. From that, we've identified a number of projects through the plan. What the plan has told us is that we can't do all 3 projects. The plan is telling us we can only do one of those projects this year because we've got other stuff on and limited resources, unless obviously we want to go out and bring externals in or something like that. But we're trying to tell the story of, we've identified these projects, here's our plan, this is the reason we can only do one of those projects, and we think the one that will give the most benefit back to the council is project 2. Therefore, your business case is basically saying, by investing this amount of money into delivering project 2, we will help the commercial development department to get from where they are today to where they want to be from an ambition perspective, or at least will help them on that journey. And there is an expected return on this of X, which might not be pounds, it might be customer service, it might be efficiency, people, anything like that. But you're telling the story, so it's almost impossible to turn the business case down because of how we've structured it, because we've gone in and said, look, we did all this work up front, we identified all these problems, we put together this list of actions, we've then taken those actions and drawn out what a set of projects might look like. We've planned that out over the financial year of what we can do. We know we can only do this one, and having done the work, we know that this will give us the best return. Therefore, put the money into this. We will help them deliver more, deliver their savings, deliver their ambition. It's a much simpler business case to write than one of those from a buzzword bingo game. And so the agility again is about the simplicity of it. It's so much easier to write business cases once even when you have all that information up front. And again, if we talked about cloud, it's very difficult sometimes just to write a business case that says our strategy says we should move to cloud. Here's the business case. It doesn't work like that. So onto one of the main themes then, Agile project management. So Agile project management is very simply project management done in an Agile way. Everything about project management is still in it. So we have our own methodology within this, the 5D Agile project management, and you'll see why it's called that in a minute. But it is clear that we're not just talking about Scrum, we're not just talking about Kanban, DSDM, all of those, Prince 2. We're blending them. We're using elements of each. We're taking the best bits and the ones that allow us to deliver quickly and easily. So for me, what we do under 5D is we take a project, we break that project down into a series of races. In Scrum, you'd call them sprints. And again, in Scrum, there would be you'd be on like a 3-week cycle. So every sprint is 3 weeks. And there's reasons why you do that. And an element of it is so that you can measure the cadence of how many points they're doing per sprint, how they're developing, how they're getting better. We're doing project management, and that's very different. So we might have projects that start off quite slowly. You can make the races quite long. Then the races in the middle become a bit shorter. And actually, as you get towards the end of the project and we're doing user testing, we're doing training, we're getting ready to go live, you might want to make them really short. You might want to make them weekly. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is say we've got a project, We need to break that project down into a series of races, and then each race is broken down into a series of tasks. So again, we're stealing elements of Scrum where they would have big backlogs and you put the right user stories and things into each sprint. We're putting tasks in, but they're project management tasks, not product management tasks. And in some cases, you won't just have race one field, you'll have tasks across all of them, but you can add more into each race as you go. And again, at the end of each race, you can start to plan for the next race. What else do we need to do? And elements of this are around making sure that other departments are available when you want them in as part of the project. So I see quite often projects fail because actually IT and digital have got a plan, but the department they're working with don't necessarily have the same plan, or they become or they get too much work come in. So planning teams might suddenly get a deluge of applications and they can't give the resources. So we break this down to enable you to be a bit more agile and flexible in what you're doing in each of these races. So the 5D element, so my book that I wrote is called Be the Five, and it basically goes through 5Ds of how you're setting up as a chief exec or director who doesn't really understand technology. Within this, we're using the same 5Ds to identify the tasks that we're going to do and why we're going to do them. So as part of this, we're talking about discuss tasks. So you'll label some of these tasks as discuss. So who are we talking to? Why are we talking to them? What was the outcome of those conversations? And a lot of this is about making sure that those conversations are happening and they're happening at the right time, and digital and IT aren't going off and making their own assumptions or ideas. We're actually working together as one team. We're doing show and tells, we're taking information back from those discussion tasks. So we really want to make sure that these are happening, and at the end of each race we can say, right, how many discussion tasks did we have to do? Are we having enough talks? Are the department making enough people available for us to help us deliver the work? We then have discovery tasks, which again is self-explanatory, isn't it? Go and find out what you've discovered. But that might be around the solutions that you found, ways of doing it, things that other councils have done. But it's about, again, working together and recording each of these things in tasks. So if we have done a show and tell and people have come back and said, this doesn't work, that doesn't work, mark them all as discovery tasks, capture that information. So I mentioned at the start, we're still thinking about audit and governance. So we're capturing all this information within the project. Decision tasks is relatively straightforward. It's what decisions have we made, and for this we might include all of our change tasks that we have, because the agility is about accepting change. So although that goes against a lot of projects where we blindly deliver them as they are, we're talking here about accepting changes into that, doing things slightly differently. Maybe you need to speak to housing benefit as part of this and it's April, you're going to have to push back on that because they're massively busy during that month. Change, tweak, but give the project team kind of the flexibility and control to manage that themselves. Not every change has to go up 5 tiers through the council to be signed off and approved. Give the teams the support they need to make those decisions themselves. And again, just make sure that when you are doing change tasks or making decisions, that you're doing it with a view on what the outcome of the project needs to be, so that you're still going on the right line. You can't just change a project completely. You're tweaking it, but still coming to the same conclusion and same outcomes. Design is slightly more technical, but obviously keep records of why you've done things the way that you've done them. People move, they leave, they go to different councils, they move on, they retire. You want to be able to look back at a project in a year and go, why did we build this the way that we built it? So again, I'd expect to see all those tasks within that. Again, you might want to just pull a report a year later that said, bring me a list of all the design tasks that we did on this project, so you can go through them and see exactly why something was done the way it is. And you may turn around and say, actually, what they did at the time was fine, but we now need to change it because we've got a different tool set, different skill set, or we need to do something differently. But again, we're looking at kind of that audit and governance of our projects that we don't necessarily always have within the project. We might have it separately documented, but this is bringing those in. And then deliver tasks. obviously these are the things that we're actually doing as part of the race. So we'll have a bigger list probably of deliver tasks than anything else with what we're doing. And again, we've got some values and principles. Delivery is the primary measure of progress. So if we know we've got 30 tasks to do in each race, we measure at the end of the race how many of those tasks did we complete, which ones weren't complete, why weren't they complete, do we need to roll them into the next race, or do we actually need a meeting and a review of those. And then at regular interviews, the team reflects on how to become more effective. So again, at the end of each race, actually sit down and say, right, how did that race go? What problems did we have? What went well? What didn't go well? So that as a project team, you're also constantly learning. So we need to spend time making sure that the way we deliver projects also becomes more efficient and more effective, not just obviously the outcomes of the teams that we're working with. So they were the 5 Ds. So discuss, discover, decide, design, and deliver. And what that then looks like, and we'll steal from Kanban this time, not Scrum. You get a Kanban board with your list of tasks within it, those that are not started, those that are running, those that are finished. And we keep the theme, so the races that we have that are broken down, we sometimes use a terminology of laps, and within our terminology, a lap is a week of time. So a race could be 5 laps, a race could be 6 laps, a race could be 1 lap. So it just gives you that flexibility to change depending on where you are at in a project and what the project is and how long you think each reporting period needs to be. But you're going to have these tasks. Within that, what have you done, what haven't, and then it becomes quite easy to report on. So you get to the end of this and you're doing a report and you're saying, okay, how many tasks did we have to do? How many were done? How many weren't? It's not we're 40% of the way through a line on a Gantt chart. If the task is too big to fit into one race, you break the task down into smaller chunks so that it does fit. And that way it becomes much simpler and easier to manage with multiple tasks rather than one line where you're guessing the percentage that you've done with each. So in the same way as in Scrum, when you're writing user stories, you're trying to make them small enough to be able to be delivered within an individual sprint. We take the same approach and say that the tasks that you have to deliver within a race should fit within a single race, not to have one task spread over many. So again, we're just trying to simplify the way that we do projects. But that doesn't mean that you don't do everything else that you would normally do in a project. So anyone who's done Prince2 or PMBOK or something similar and has a qualification in that, we're still doing all the planning, we're still managing risks, we're still looking at issues, stakeholder management, budget control, all of that is still happening. We're not getting away from that. We're just breaking our projects down into smaller chunks so that we can look at them and go, where do we need to change? What do we need to add into the next one? We're planning this race now. What does the next race look like? Who do we need to speak to? What discovery do we need to do? And making it simple and easy for you to follow a plan. But all of the standard project management elements that you would normally do in a project, you're still going to do and you're still going to deliver. So don't think Agile project management is a way of getting out of doing lots of work. There's as much to do within this. It's just different. Again, I mentioned reporting. I know this picture's not overly clear, but here you've kind of got the 5 types of task within that, the number of tasks that you had and the number of tasks completed. And again, you might just want to say something like, if we did over 80% of the tasks within a race, we'll mark that race as green. If we did 70 to 80%, we'll mark it as amber. And if we did less than 70, it's a red race. And again, we can do a bit of a retrospective look at why that happened. And we can list out any issues with the race and the outcome that we achieved at the end of it. So we're working to a race outcome each time of what we want, the position that we wanted to be in at the end of each race. But then we're not having to write pages and pages and pages of highlight reports or anything else. We're literally just saying these are all the tasks we listed out and this is how many of those we did. And we're basically leaving it to the project team or the PMO to understand that that was the right amount and the right level of each of those to deliver a successful project. And so reporting upwards into project boards or portfolio boards and programs and management teams and things becomes quite simple and straightforward. You can just go, here's our list of races that we've done, here's the RAG status of each race, simple to see where we're going wrong and what we need to do to fix it. And then the fifth stage of your project is really the benefits and looking at what you're trying to do. So what you've identified up front is the ambition of each department. You've identified the problems and you know which problems you're trying to fix. So you kind of know what the outcomes are that you're trying to achieve in a project when you're writing the strategy. So you can kind of see how it's all starting to come together. The difference really is you've got a number of smaller bits within that. So outcomes, realistically, if you're putting let's say you're putting a CRM system in, the outcome is that we've got a CRM system that's up and running and live. In a lot of cases, that's where people are ending the project. The desired outcome was that probably you wanted to save some money, you wanted to make staff more efficient, you wanted to make customer service scores higher, you wanted to automate more. You might not know that for 6 to 12 months after the end of a project. So you have to have a way of going back into a project or back into a team and saying, we know we delivered this. Are you where we want you to be? Or are there things we also need to do to help you get there? So have we delivered everything we thought we were going to do? Have we bridged the gap from where you were to where you wanted to be? And if not, we might have to do a small project around that to work out any other changes we need to do. But make sure we are going back in at a much later date to find out if we're hitting the desired outcomes. And again, identify them up front, but know that the finance director might have a different desired outcome to the HR director, who might have a different outcome to the resources director, who might have a different desired outcome to the chief exec. Understand everyone's perspective so that you can look at a project and actually define whether you thought it was a success or not. And again, we have a simple kind of score within our system where we mark projects as gold, silver or bronze, kind of keeping that race theme going on throughout it. And again, we leave that up to you to determine what a gold, silver or bronze project is. But again, at the end of the year, you can look back and go, okay, which of our projects delivered a gold project, which were silver, which were bronze, which ones do we need to go back in and look again? And there's a simple exercise I give people on some of those outcomes to actually flesh out the desired outcome. And it's a sentence that goes, I want something because something, because something. And the reason I do that is because it forces them to change the language to make it work better. So we've got an example here of I want to implement a new planning system because we're struggling to keep up with demand because our processes are too manual and time consuming. And it could be anything. It could be multiple things around money, savings, efficiencies or whatever. But if you can get a director or a manager to actually sit down and go, I want because, you'll kind of end up with their desired outcome because they have to reword what they're thinking because of the second because. So if you want to have a little play with that and see how it works, you'll find that you can't write a sentence as you probably thought you could initially. So as we've said there, outcome is to implement a new planning system in this example. The desired outcome is to improve processes for staff and become more efficient. And then how do you measure that? So again, we're going to go back in 6 months, 12 months after we've given them the new planning system to look at have they become more efficient and how we're going to measure that. So again, we're coming back to reviewing data, reflecting on what we've done, how have we become more effective, have they become more effective, tune it, tweak it. So there's a huge element within this again of continuous improvement that hopefully most of you are undertaking anyway, but you can now kind of replay your continuous improvement and work it back to what you found in the strategy initially. And so this is kind of where we get the agility into the overall framework. So we've gone through the 5 elements of strategy, plan, business case, projects and benefits. And you'll see that throughout each of them, we've either identified or we've tackled the ambitions, the problems and the actions. So we're effectively able to tell that story quite simply and straightforwardly from everything from the work we did up front to put the strategy in place, through to the plan that identified the actions we can do, through to the business case that says invest some money in solving this problem because that department has their ambition. We've then put together a project, and again we're going to run that slightly iteratively, so we can get away from elements that we can't change. We want to make sure we're flexible and adaptable, want to make sure the right people are available when we need them, want to make sure that we're talking to the right people, doing discovery, finding out all of that in a way that we can audit and has still got the right governance and we can still report from. And then we take those and we go take the ambitions into the benefits at the end of that and make sure that we're actually delivering what we said we were going to deliver. And if you go back to the problem page at the start of the presentation when we talked about local government isn't necessarily delivering the savings through digital, things like that, we're not finding the efficiencies, it's quite often because we're just picking up projects and doing them without necessarily seeing how it flows from the strategy through. So although you might think agility and agile is about almost doing less, in a way it's about being able to do less because you've done more up front and just following that through. So hopefully that's given you a bit of food for thought as to how you can do it. I could have spent an hour just on the project side of things, but I wanted to actually give you the fuller framework because it does hopefully make more sense once you understand where you're coming from the strategy piece all the way through, that you see how you can start to deliver. And I think the council, the local government will start to see more benefits actually coming off the back of this because you can always track things back. And as we say, we're effectively telling stories in the work that we're doing. Even when we get into the benefits stage, the last stage, we're telling a story all the way back because we're actually identifying some of those outcomes and ambitions in that final stage as part of the strategy work up front. So hopefully that all makes sense and ties together nicely. Again, I apologise slightly that some of the slides are wordy, but obviously if we share these slides with you all afterwards, if you want a copy, it's going to help you, I think, having all those words on the page rather than me putting some nice pictures and then just standing up and talking to you about them. So I've done that on purpose to try and make this a usable document that you can do. And again, key thing, simplicity. The art of maximising the amount of work not done is essential. And again, what we're trying to say there is not to not do the work, do that big piece of work up front, get your strategy sorted, get that set, and everything else will flow from it. And then when you're delivering projects, give the project team kind of the authority and control that they need to go away and deliver these. And again, another really badly formatted slide by me, and apologies for that. But as I mentioned, I have a book, Be the Five, that's available on Amazon, podcast on pretty much every platform, I think, Anchor, Spotify, whatever you prefer. There's a YouTube channel with a number of videos on, plus some of the videos of the software that we've got to help you do some of this, plus pretty much every recording I've done on digital leaders or anything else over the years. Ditch, again, is the framework. We also have the Ditch project management tool that will help you deliver some of that. I'm looking to expand it to cover all 5 stages eventually. We're not there yet, but that's definitely on the cards. And again, on my website, there's a self-assessment if you just want to go on and see where you kind of are as an organisation or where your digital confidence is at as an organisation. There's a free self-assessment you can take and it will just give you a score at the end of it. So hopefully that's been informative, hopefully been quite useful. I appreciate we've had to go through it relatively quickly, but my details are here. You can email me questions, anything you want to know about this. I didn't expect it to actually be the full hour, but I'm coming up to about 40 seconds left of that. But this is for you guys. This isn't a paid thing that you have to necessarily take. This is a framework that you can all work to that will enable you to set out your plans, set out a bit of structure to how we're delivering digital, and give you more confidence in the delivery of those digital projects than I think we've probably had before, and definitely from what I've seen over the last decade, 15 years of working in local gov. So thank you all for listening, for staying on, and drop me any questions that you have on this. But Thank you very much.